media coverage of this note was not exactly recognized by the administration, and they say that did not represent exactly their aim at how they want to negotiate NAFTA. But also, let me reassure you that nothing that we at the end do in NAFTA will be damaging for Mexico, because obviously there is a space for which we can do a win-win-win proposition. Some of the elements that are in that release probably reflect the general terms in which an agreement should be upgraded, modernized, or changed. But most of the time, these pieces of communication are done at a very high level of analysis, and you know always the devil is in the detail. So even each one of those elements that you read in that coverage can be extremely difficult to negotiate when you go to the specifics.
But more fundamentally, can we assume that NAFTA, that the existing treaty won't be changed in a very substantial way? That's what the draft proposal suggests.
Well, let me tell you that when you modernize an agreement, you are going to introduce very, very modern things, like things that didn't exist 20 years ago. So,
such as what?
Like electronic e-commerce is one of them. Like the new approach in energy, because 20 years ago, North America was not sufficient in energy sources. And today, with the discovery of shale gas and shale oil, with the energy reform in Mexico, you have really a very different world in energy today. You have, like, for instance, new biotechnological medicine that was not covered 20 years ago. So those are very important changes that are going to be, probably what you mean is that it will not be challenging or damaging for the Mexican economy, and that I can assure you, nothing that I agree on NAFTA is going to be against the interest of Mexico.
Well, that's certainly the negotiating position you're going to go in with. I would do the same thing. But let's be specific about what is going to be part of the agreement. The energy industry, oil in particular, will be part of the new treaty.
Yes.
Software, e-commerce, and technology in general will be part of the new treaty.
It will be a new approach to telecom that today is highly relevant.
Go into a little more detail if you don't mind.
But I mean, besides the areas that are new for NAFTA, what I can share with you is elements that when you hear the interviews of my colleagues in Washington, and we agree with some of those positions, like for instance, we have to strengthen the value content in North America, right, to bring production process to this region of the world, is one element. The other element that also I hear is very important for the US is rebalancing of trade. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm very glad that President Trump has ordered this analysis of trade deficits around the world. Personally, as an economist, I don't agree on the approach that you should worry so much for trade deficits. But if you want to look at them, you should not look at just one country. You should look at the whole thing, because today the world is engaged in global value chains. You may have some deficits with some countries in order to try to have surplus with other countries. So when they look at this deficit, they will realize that Mexico-US deficit is this size, relatively speaking, to the size of China and other countries. So at the end of the day, in trade relocation, Mexico will be willing to buy more from the US. We're already buying a lot. We're the second largest buyer of US goods. But we can make an additional effort as long as you have supply process already in place to be able to supply to Mexico at a competitive cost.
What about the Buy America clause that the Trump administration seems to have a sincere level of interest in inserting into the treaty?
If they want to withdraw our ability to sell goods to public sector in the US, the same restrictions will apply on the Mexican side. So if they want US companies to have less access to sell infrastructure projects or other type of elements into Mexico, they will have to guarantee access on the other side.
What's the timeline for the beginning of these negotiations? We heard last month that the notice would be sent to Congress within weeks. Nothing's happened.
You're right. I mean, Mexico already, we are in our process of consultations. We'll end up this process by May, and the US has to trigger the mechanism. What I keep hearing is that after Congress come back from recess, they will be able to notify by the end of April. And if that is the case, we may start negotiations at the end of July.
And how long do you think they'll take?
it will be in the best interest of all countries involved to make this process very efficient. Why? Because there is an election in the US in November, and there is an election in Mexico in the middle of summer. So we need to guarantee that whatever we negotiate is approved before this change in your Congress and in our presidency.
So optimistically, how many months?
6 months of negotiations, and then send it to the legislative branch for them to approve it.
The peso is much stronger now than it was several weeks ago. Is it better for Mexico to enter these negotiations with a strong peso or a weak peso?
I think that the relative strength of the peso negotiations is not an element that will change my position. I will not make long-term decisions for my country pressured by the short-term elements of an exchange rate. That will not be wise. It may be painful, but it will not be in the best interest of my country.